Alright, hello everybody, and today I'm going to be going over the 5 biggest coding mistakes I made in the early days that I wish I knew earlier. So let's get right into it. Alright, number 1, and this one's a small one, but it was not using EMMET and the auto rename tag pretty early into my career when I was just coding in straight HTML or even JSX. This one's not a very big one, but not using EMMET and not having the auto rename tag installed in VS Code can definitely slow you down a decent amount and really take away from, where you could be learning other things or you could be doing harder things within your project. Or mistake number 2 was not decoupling and not being overly organized. In my early career, I never made helper functions. I just always put everything in 1, maybe 2 files, and the top of my files or any part of my files were an absolute mess. They were impossible to read. They were impossible to go through and debug because it was all in one file and you had to just go line by line by line by line. And that definitely slowed down my ability to finish projects, because as the projects get more and more complicated, you're up to, 5, 10, 15 pages. Each page is different. Each page requires functions. And not only that, but you're rebuilding functions that you've already made. And to the same note, I was also not very organized. So now I try to make as many, many different folders for all different kinds of components and functions and, say, context providers, or really anything. Just being overly organized never hurts. Having a lot of folders might seem overwhelming, but it's never going to be as overwhelming as having, 20 functions in one file. That is miserable. And if I could go back, I would right off the rip be more organized and decouple functions all the time. Mistake number 3 was learning too many things at once. Early in my career, I just wanted volume. I wanted to keep learning, because, when you're just starting to learn development, front-end development, software development, any of the core sort of departments of development, you learn so fast. You learn incredibly fast because the concepts aren't very hard, so you can learn them really quickly. HTML, you could learn HTML in 24 hours, really. You can get very good at CSS in a couple weeks to a month. But once you get deeper and deeper and deeper, and then you're starting to get into advanced JavaScript, you're starting to get into React, you're starting to get into frameworks, it gets so much more dense, but you don't realize it. And then a big problem that I ran into as well with learning too many things at once was learning from YouTube only, which was my primary means of learning in the beginning, because obviously the concepts weren't very hard. So you could go on YouTube, you could look at a 30-minute video of how to build a website in HTML and CSS, or how to use request animation frame. You can use YouTube for those kind of things, but what ends up happening, is you watch a 7-minute Web Dev Simplified video. Shout out Web Dev Simplified. He's taught me probably half of my skills. But you watch one, and the problem is you watch it and you don't normally go much deeper into the subject. You have to slow down and focus the deeper you get into your career. And the last thing with learning too many things at once is I definitely recommend going out and learning, seeing what Vue is all about, seeing what Svelte is all about, seeing what all these things, seeing the difference between TypeScript and JavaScript, and, learning these things and finding out what you like best. But I do recommend that once you figure out what you really like to use, I would focus really hard on that tech stack. It's not going to hurt you, and it's not going to pin you in a corner if you learn Next.js like so well, because you can always add in TypeScript, and you can learn TypeScript pretty quickly once you sort of master Next.js and JavaScript. Say Vue, for example, you want to learn Vue, you've been learning React for a while and you want to learn Vue, go ahead and learn Vue and see what that's all about. See if you want to switch from React to Vue. It's similar idea of components, so it's not going to, learning React isn't going to make it so you will never be able to learn Vue or Svelte or any of these other frameworks. It's still going to help you. It's still going to help you learn foundational skills. But once you really know what you like, go hard at that. Like, I already know my tech stack, and I know it's probably not going to change too much. Maybe I'll add TypeScript someday. But currently, this is my tech stack, which is HTML, CSS, obviously, JavaScript, React, and Next.js is what I build everything with. And then also I specialize a little bit with 3JS/WebGL and Shopify Liquid. That leads me into mistake number 4, which is not using award publications to learn new things. If you're struggling to find more things to learn, or you want to learn more creative things, then going on awwwards.com and scrolling through sites and going over all these different sites of the day or sites of the month, sites of the year, even honorable mention, and going through these sites and really analyzing them, you'll find almost an infinite amount of new things to learn. Not many of them are going to be fundamentals, but you're going to learn an absolute mass amount of creative techniques that'll really help you, put things on your portfolio or add small little details to future sites or anything like that. So if you are struggling to find new things to learn, go on award publication sites. Specifically, I recommend awwwards.com. Go through there, go through sites of the day, go get your mind blown by how good some of these developers are and how crazy some of these techniques are. And then also feel free to go check out my portfolio site that I have launched on awards. It is one honorable mention. Go check that out. And if you check that out, go ahead and comment down below what you rate it out of 10. And finally, mistake number 5 that I wish that I knew earlier was not being optimal with my CSS. One, not naming things efficiently. So I would obviously semantically name things. If I'm making an image with text section, it would just be image dash with dash text. That was how I would name everything, separate with hyphens, and I would do everything that way. But what I ran into is when I started using CSS modules with Next.js, and then also even just writing plain CSS. First, with modules, you can't use hyphenated class names with modules. So that's a huge issue if you want to use CSS modules in a framework, specifically Next.js. So now what I do is I name everything camel case. So it'll just be, instead of hyphens, it'll just be image with text with capital W, capital T, and I'll do that. And what that does is also makes it easier to copy classes over into your CSS file. So you can just double click, bring them over into your CSS file, paste them, then you're done. You don't have to do the whole drag thing, which is a small thing. But if you are working on a big project and by the end of the project, you've dragged and copied something, say 1,000 times, if you optimize that thing that you've done 1,000 times, it's going to greatly help. And then also you can use these class names in CSS modules. And another thing that I did not do, which I wish I would have done earlier, is use more global styles. Now I absolutely abuse global styles. I'll make one header class with like small, medium, large, XL, and just use that instead of, making a image with text header or something like that. And that's what I would normally do earlier in my career. And then another side CSS tip is this may be very controversial, but I do not recommend using Tailwind, Bootstrap, or Sass. I recommend learning plain CSS. I recommend getting really good at plain CSS. But once you get into making like sort of more creative websites, you need to have very good understanding of CSS and be able to style things very, very creatively. If you are using Tailwind and you already are advanced, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. You're already good at CSS. If you're using Tailwind and you're further on in your career, that's whatever. That's fine. But if you're early in your career of web development, I do not recommend learning a library. I recommend getting incredibly good at CSS, like incredible at CSS, before you can use any libraries, you use any style, you like auto-built UI components, stuff like that. I definitely recommend using plain CSS. So those were my top 5 mistakes I made in my career that I wish I knew earlier. If you guys have any other things that you guys wish you knew earlier in your career, please comment down below. That's all. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.